Hello, Nancy.
Hi, Carolyn.
We're finally here. And
Yeah.
hi, everybody. I cannot tell you how excited I am. Nancy knows I've been telling her that for weeks and weeks and weeks to finally do our course on sacred guidance through near-death experiences. And I'm sure because you are already uh, on this class, you know the history of how I tracked her down, having listened to her story about her near-death experience, all of which is available on links with this class, so we don't have to go through that again. So we're just going to jump right into why I wanted so much to do a class with her. And I'm going to do a brief introduction and then turn it over to the star of the show. But what truly compelled me to track Nancy down was that her story, in such a grounded, beautiful way, validated what I had begun to suspect for years now through my own work in medical intuition, but more than that, as someone deeply immersed now in mystical theology and applying mystical theology to your biology is essentially what I do. So it's like your mystical biology and to the power that we have, which is probably the most difficult thing in the world to communicate to you, to how to inspire you to understand how powerful you are. And that, and I'll say this and then shut up, that I thought in the beginning, as a medical intuitive, that it was these big events that traumatized us and did the most damage. And that we had to do so much in order to heal. But in fact, as Nancy will talk about, it's really the tiniest things that heaven looks at and the power of our intention. And I realized that the more I worked with people, was that it's the smallest, what we think of as most insignificant part of ourselves that has the most power. Get, giving credence to so many of the grand scriptural teachings. The mustard seed beats out the mountain every time, and just so much in Buddhism and in Christian mysticism. So I am thrilled to offer this. And so, Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you and our first class, which is, what are the lessons from the near deathers, and you go for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. And thanks so much for reaching out to me all those months ago and tracking me down. It's still so amazing to me that you did. I've known about you for so long. So I'm really honored, honestly, to be here. This is amazing to me. So what are some of the things that we learn? That's what I came back here for. It wasn't to give people a kind of a tour of heaven. That's cool and it's beautiful and all that. But what's really the most important part of what near-death experiencers bring back to everybody? Well, it's little lessons that are actually quite large when you pull them apart. These are little lessons of oneness and unity. That was the first big one for me, was this unity of consciousness, this unity of love, not just here on this planet, but really across our entire universe. And that everything in this universe is really at its core structure created out of that unity of love and consciousness with the divine. It's a divine consciousness. It's divine love. That's really the first big thing that most of us who have these experiences learn. It's, obviously these are different for every person, but these are the things that I wanted to talk about when I came back, was really that. In fact, one of my friends said, one of the first things I told him was, the universe is stuck together with divine love. That's how I put it when I first, like within days of coming out of this experience. And it's really tough to put that into words unless you've been there, but I'm going to try to do that in this course so that you get an understanding throughout these 4 courses of what it is that I'm talking about and why I'm bringing these messages back. So that's the first one. We're all stuck together with love. as crazy as that sounds, and some days you can believe it more than others, that's actually kind of how the universe is structured. So the other one, kind of everything revolves around that basic teaching of love. And in fact, when I was dead, and I don't mind saying it because I was dead on the operating table. When I was dead, my teacher or angel said that if you only learn one thing while you're here with me, it's the nature of love. And so she spent a ton of time with me, teaching me the nuances of that. So that's really the core of what we're talking about in these 4 courses. But there are other things that go along with that too. And we're going to dive into these in depth over these next several days. But the next one really is gratitude. And gratitude is a practice, but it's also another form of love. So again, it contributes to that sense and structure of divine love. Along with that is kindness and compassion. But also, it isn't just about directing that stuff outward. And this is a big deal. This is one of the things that was really difficult for me to learn. And we'll talk about this in more depth as well. We're not just giving this to other people, but we're being asked to include ourselves in our own love and our own compassion, our own kindness, and our own gratitude, because we are divine entities. We are created by the divine. We have this gift of a body and a life. And it's that gift that is really propelling us forward in this life. But we are special, each one of us. We're all equal in this divine love. And we deserve to give our love to ourselves as well as to gift it on other people. So as we go through this course, remember that you are also worthy of your own love. That was a really challenging lesson for me to learn. It took me a good 18 months to 2 years after my experience to really understand that fully. And maybe I still don't, but I think I'm much better than I was before. So those are kind of the basics of love. We'll talk about, too, the importance of how you show up in your life every day. And this isn't meant to get you all bogged down in details, but we will talk about this specifically today, why it's important to just monitor your thoughts and feelings to some extent as much as you can, but definitely your words and your actions, because those are how you put yourself out there to other people. And with your words and actions, you can build other people up or tear them apart. And that includes yourself. Again, it goes back to you as well. So we'll talk about monitoring words and actions as part of this. The other parts that I learned were things about community, banding together in venues like this to share with each other and to give each other our support and our friendship and our love, and not to be as isolated as some of us like to think we need to be, but really to reach out in friendship and compassion and kindness with other people as much as we can. So those are some of the main things that we're going to be speaking about. But I want you to remember, as Carolyn alluded to already in her intro here, this isn't necessarily big actions that you need to take. We're talking about small daily things. And that's, I kind of operate that way anyway. I'm sort of a simpler person. I grew up on a farm and I like things clean cut and simple and easy to do. So one of the things we're going to talk about here is the importance of these small things that Carolyn alluded to. Everyday little things that you do and say to other people are so vitally important. And I'll talk about why that is here in just a little bit. So Carolyn wanted me to talk a little bit about, as before we get going into the real deep stuff, why is it that near-death experiences seem to be more prevalent today than at any other time in history. Now, let's first do a quick backtrack. An NDE is when you are medically compromised. A person gets medically compromised. Usually it's full-on cardiac arrest of some kind or death, but medically compromised. And basically what happens is your soul or your consciousness leaves your body and goes on to what some people call the afterlife. And there's things that you experience while you're there, and then you come back. So that's kind of how the whole term near-death experience came up. It was coined a very long time ago, and it's not quite as well accepted anymore as it used to be. Those of us who have these experiences tend to start calling them these days. We call them death experiences because that's really what they are. But we will stick with the official term and call it an NDE. But an NDE fundamentally changes a person, and it's usually immediate, absolutely immediate. Like when I came back from mine, I was in this state of unbelievable, profound love and support and connection and grace. Like I was floating on cloud 9 for a good 3 to 6 months time frame. And that's where you see the love and peace and joy in everyone and everything, no matter who they are. And so that's how we know that these things are real, the profound effect that they have on the experiencer. And then to some extent, the profound effect they have on the people around them. I have talked to nurses, many, many nurses out there, and even some doctors who have seen these in their patients. And my own doctor was one of them. He's, I talked with him for about 90 minutes about mine, which is unheard of in a medical office. And he said he's seen these at least once a month in his entire practice. Like at least once a month, he's got somebody who's got an NDE. And for him, it has been exceedingly validating and hope-filled, and it's given him the strength to be the spiritual doctor that he is. I didn't know that he was at the time I had him, but as a physician. But these things actually affect other people, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. But practically speaking, why are we seeing more of these? Well, there's one very scientific explanation. There are definitely more people on the planet now than ever before. And we've got better medical interventions than we've ever had in the past. And so we're able to bring more people back from that brink of death than ever before. But that's really not the core of why we're seeing more of these. So that's not the full story, and it's not the biggest part of the story. So spiritually speaking, I actually asked my guides and angels about this because it was interesting to me. Why was this happening? Why are we having these things in our society? And the answer was actually a lot more spiritual than I ever would have guessed. I had no idea what was coming out of this. So this is what they told me. Humanity, both at our individual personal level and societally, so at the bigger global level, we need these experiences now more than ever. And that was a little bit interesting to me. I didn't understand why. I mean, I could see where I needed it because I was an atheist and a non-believer, and I needed a reset to come back to what I was supposed to be doing in my life. But I didn't understand about the whole societally or globally thing. So for people like me, if you read my NDE in a book or watch some videos, you'll remember that I had agreed to do this before I was even born. So Carolyn knows what that's all about. Those are those contracts that a lot of us remember having. And I was shown that contract in bold detail during my NDE because I, couldn't remember it at that beginning stage. So I and a lot of other people agreed to have this I call it a reset, to have this NDE as a way to help myself, but really to help those around me, society, my family, my friends. And that can be a specific reason for coming in. For me, it was part of my purpose. It was a small part of my purpose, but it was part of my purpose for coming into this life here. And I wanted that experience of being an atheist, but I made that agreement or contract to come back to the light and live from a place of connection and love and peace to help myself, but really it was to help other people. So my guides kind of expanded on that a little bit. And I asked, well, again, why are you putting these people all around the globe? Why is it? It seems like it's intentional. So what they told me was humanity as a whole needs to have experiencers like this, not just NDEs, but other similar experiences. Seeded, they call it seeded, I call it planted, seeded across the globe. So both geographically and within, the hierarchy of society, meaning like from doctors to blue collar workers to basically everybody. Because even if those of us who have had these experiences don't talk about what we learned, just our own personal shift when we come back, the personal shift in consciousness that results from having an experience like an NDE, it can positively affect the world around us. So our neighborhoods, our families, our friends, it's an energetic, positive shift, helping other people attain a higher level of consciousness too. And that was really interesting to me that it was very intentional where people were asked to go, where people were having these experiences. I had my NDE while I lived in Colorado, but it was very clear to me that I needed to move away from Colorado and go somewhere else. And so I did. I followed what was in my heart to do, even though I didn't necessarily want to live in Arizona as a human being. I moved here because I felt that compulsion in my heart to come here and stay here. And I was told after I moved here that was because they needed to balance out where all of us were. So there's a big balancing effect as to why so many people are having these. It's not that we force other people to have a higher consciousness. It's that we're just here and allowing the transition to happen more easily for other people. Each person who achieves a higher level of consciousness or a shift toward compassion or kindness has an effect on those people around them, whether you've had an NDE or not. So that's one of the reasons why there are so many of us kind of planted all around the globe. And it's very helpful for where we're going to be as a society. So here's the next part of what I learned is that most NDEs themselves, and especially true for me, are sort of a breaking open for an individual and very symbolic on many levels. So I experienced a real physical death, but I also experienced a symbolic death or a breaking open of my old self. So all the old thoughts and beliefs were torn apart, especially my beliefs about the nature of reality, that this was, just a physical universe, that there was no spirituality, that none of us lived past death, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff that most atheists carry around with them needed to be fractured apart, which then allowed kind of a new light of awareness and love and a flowering of compassion and connection to come into my life. So there's that essence of, we need to have that breaking apart of the old self and that symbolic death. That's what I needed. Now, let's take a look back at the society again. This was a mind bender for me when I learned this from my angels. Um, a lot of this stuff was, by the way, Carolyn's laughing because we've talked about this at length. This was like going from zero belief to being off the charts in a matter of minutes, and it really freaked me out. But the the big deal with society is that we are at a crossroads, and our human society is evolving at multiple levels. And this is one of those things that my angels blew my mind with. Like, there's our individual, spiritual evolution. There's the societal evolution, the changing of our society, and that biologically we're also evolving as well. And all those taken together means that we as a globe, as a human society on this planet, are at a collective crossroads. We're at a breaking open point. We are at sort of that NDE point where I was right before my NDE. Now, I don't want society to go through the equivalent of what I went through. So that's why those of us who have had these experiences talk about them, because you don't have to do that. We don't have to do that as a society. We can learn from what I already went through, what other people already went through. So that's why we do these courses, is to help give you the information so that you don't need to go through what I went through. And hopefully we kind of prevent society from going through a collective NDE as well. That's really what I'm here to prevent. We can learn this stuff as a society the easy way. And that's what I want to do here. So as the hearts and minds of experiencers break open, we like to share that information with other people so that you all don't have to do this. Now, each individual over the course of his or her existence will go through that shift to a higher state of awareness and consciousness, and society will too. I've actually seen it. I was shown what they call the golden outcome of our society. And it's amazing. And I know we're going to get there. We can navigate to it very easily if we all start learning these lessons, and paying attention to the messages that we bring back from NDEs and related experiences. But there is a sense of urgency among my angels and guides and the rest of the angels and masters. And I'm sure that a lot of you understand what I'm talking about. Now is the time that we need to really shift the human species onto a more constructive path. That's, where society needs to have the lessons from these NDEs without the death part. I really don't want anything bad to happen to our collective society. I want us all to get to that golden outcome, the loving way, the kind way, the compassionate way. So that's one of the reasons that we do this. But Carolyn wanted, and we talked about this before the class, but she wanted to mention, and Carolyn, you can pop in here too. Shift points like this are times of huge change.
Well, I'm going to join you for a moment and say, absolutely. I think everybody, honestly, is aware that something's in the air, that this air does not feel like it used to. And if you just look at it from a practical point of view, look at the size of the issues that we are facing. They are all potentially huge, catastrophic things like climate change and global pandemics and global wars. And I mean, we're facing globalism, but in a destructive way. And at the same time, we have spent the last decades becoming very focused on ourselves in a way that's never happened before. Never in the history of humanity have people been so focused on the pursuit of themselves and their own empowerment. And that has made people, it's real interesting to me, it's made people hypersensitive and very narcissistic. And it's almost essential narcissism, if I can put those two words together. Because what's really happening is that, I listen to people talk about how they, excuse me, want to take their power back, or someone said a word to them and they've got to deal with that and process it, and they've become microprocessors of the dynamics between people. But what's really happening, if they could look at mystical mathematics, which is what you're talking about, is that what we are growing into is the realization of how powerful every word we say is.
Yeah.
And if we have to, actually go through therapy to recover from what someone said to us 40 years ago, because that sentence still has creative weight, what we should be focusing on is how come one sentence has so much power? Never mind what was said. It was that one sentence has held me hostage for 40 years, for 50 years. What kind of power is that? And if that person has that power, do I have that kind of power? And if I do, what's the source of it? Where is it coming from? How should I use this? And it's not unlike as if when we entered the nuclear age, we entered our own inner nuclear age, and the soul woke up its nuclear capacity. And now we have to understand we have that kind of power and authority, and that we are co-creating the dynamics that are happening in this universe. We are not victims, we are co-creators. We are participants, we are co-participants. We haven't adjusted to that, Nancy. We haven't gotten to that. We haven't. And I think one of the reasons for people having the mass of near-death experience is not just the advancement of medical technology, but that we really must get that we are channelers of love or destruction.
Yep.
Love or destruction. And that our soul is like a nuclear reactor, and it reacts. And that we are in charge of whether we have meltdowns and the damage we do when we do, or all that we can build with the power of our soul. And with that, which is why, the examples that you were shown, we need to get away from the idea that in order to be powerful, we have to have stuff to be powerful. We have to have money. We have to have position. We have to have, when I look at these fools, but in fact, it's the tiniest. A dear friend of mine said she made prayer ties for this barn that she goes to, because they use the horses in therapeutic ways, and she just wanted to. And I thought, as she was telling me this, my heart just lifted, because I thought of how that means a constant flow of prayer as the wind goes through. And people don't get how powerful prayer is. They don't get it. And because it's not physical, and it's not huge, and it's not flamboyant, but whoa, is it powerful.
Yeah.
So this is the shift. Prayer is like this is a very impersonal universe, but what makes it intimate is prayer. And what is amazing in your story, and the story of so many others, is that you discover in a near-death experience that every single word you say was somehow logged in.
Yep. Everything. Everything. Yeah. And it comes back at you too. And that was really at first very disturbing to me, that I couldn't hide from it. I couldn't hide from the universe. I couldn't hide from God. And I tried to. You can imagine I tried to hide, but you can't hide that stuff. The smallest thing, the smallest intent, the smallest word is a huge act of love or destruction, as you said. It can be either one, depending on your intent and the words that you say, the things that you do, all of that stuff that we sort of autopilot through on a daily basis. The vast majority of us do. I was totally there before my NDE. I lived my life on autopilot, and I didn't think about and understand how my showing up in my life in that day made a difference to people. Never occurred to me that saying kind words to a grocery store clerk at the end of the day would send a positive ripple of love through her life, that she would change the way she dealt with her kids that night. And that was one of the things that was shown to me during my NDE. That was a positive ripple I had that I didn't even understand I did.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about today, is those simple things that we do on a daily basis.
Well, it just validates that the universe would never have designed a place where power was dependent on what you had.
Right.
It's on how you understand who you are. It doesn't matter what you have. I listened to another person's near-death story, and she said, I wasn't shown that I had accomplished a doctorate and I'd gotten this and I'd gotten that. She said, you know what? Heaven didn't care at all. And if I'd known that, I would have made different choices. She said, what they showed me was how I treated my brother.
Yeah.
And again, she used this tiny example, and that mattered more. And she said, and then she was shown an example of unintentional kindness. It was just how she responded to someone in the moment, didn't know them, never saw them again, but bam, we saw this, and look at how because, and I think of all the teachings of these great mystics. Be my hands in the world. Be
Yeah.
my hands in the world. Do the business of heaven. Do the business of heaven. What is in one is in the whole. When you look at a human being, you're looking at yourself. What you do to them, you do to yourself. You don't get, these are the rules, but such simple rules.
Yep. Yep.
Such simple rules. So
Yeah, and I was told so many times that don't wait around for God to intervene on your planet. You are the hand of the divine in this life, in this world of yours. Exactly the same thing.
right.
I was told that many, many times. Stop waiting around for God to intervene.
Right.
You got two hands. Do something.
Well, I've told people again and again that the way prayers are answered is heaven will not do for you what you can do for yourself.
Right.
It's just never going to happen.
Yep.
So heaven will not do the dishes because I can do them. But if I got to the place where I couldn't figure out how to feed myself, and I said, you got to help me. I mean, I've done everything I can. You got to help me. Then an idea would come.
Yep. Yep.
But
Exactly.
heaven doesn't answer stupid or lazy. It just never will.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, the more action that you can take, the more, backing that you get from heaven. I've seen that just in my own life, and exactly what you said. After coming back here, I realized that my own happiness was mine to take on.